when we talk about this fear in the creative arts of like AI taking over, no, it's taking over the business aspects. It's taking over the mundane aspects. It's taking over the things that don't really matter so that we can spend more time being creative. And so it's not replacing us. It's replacing those mundane process and workflows that hinder our success and speed to and time to value.
Hey, Matt, how are you?
I am great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. So I like to just dive in, and AI is something that comes up a lot in conversations in my circles, primarily because creatives are worried about AI replacing them or creativity. Can you talk to me a little bit about your experience with AI and why creatives should or shouldn't be scared of the future?
Sure. So short history background on my trajectory has been, I came from a PhD in industrial organizational psychology, became a data scientist, and slowly rose through the ranks as a head of AI, chief data officer, and currently CEO of the AI advisory group. And as I've seen this trajectory of AI over the past 22 years, there's been some consistencies and some things that have revolutionized, right? So when we talk about traditional AI, a lot of that existed still in like the 1950s. We didn't have the compute power for it. But I think what a lot of people think about AI today are more of the chat GPTs and the mid journeys, right? It's what are the large language models underlying the foundations for AI that are creating or generating things. And when thinking about what does this actually mean for the future, not just of society, but especially in regards to the creative aspect, I think there's kind of two aspects to it, right? One is AI and large language models are going to be an empowerment tool. It's not a magic button where you say, give me this, and it actually produces your mind's eye. Now, it can, if you've used Midjourney or any of the other tools, Stable Diffusion, Dolly, etc., it can produce really interesting art. But if you don't know how to prompt, right? If you know you want in the style of Jackson Pollock or Quentin Tarantino or Minions, right? Then you're not going to get the output that you envision. And so people understanding how to leverage these as tools is really, really important. Because when we just think of the foundational AI, it's not going to just replace everyone. What AI will ultimately do is it's going to cause a chicken and egg situation problem, especially for more of the white collar workers. So when you think about lawyers, accountants, programmers, the first 1 to 5 years of experience, generally after you get out of college or some advanced program, you have to learn and you have to fail a lot and you put in the grind and grunt to learn what the heck to do in the job. And AI can do those pieces really, really well today. And so how are we going to get people to be more effective overall? Or how do we get them to get the requisite skill set to be effective, to be more of a senior in the space if they don't go through the same challenges and hurdles? But when we talk about creativity, it's this intrinsic, innate aspect of people. And if you're an artist, if you draw or if you're oil paint, you have to put in tons and tons and tons of practice. And AI can create a serene sunset as an oil painting, like visualization, but it certainly doesn't have the texture of that. AI can create a short video clip, but it doesn't have the emotional, visceral feel that the why mechanism, because AI doesn't understand why. It can just create, right? And it's creating based on patterns in the past of just all the data that's been uploaded to that. And so if you want to feel heartbreak, AI doesn't understand that you need to bond with a character. AI doesn't understand that like the underlying emotional sentiment of why that heartbreak occurred. AI just knows to create someone crying, right? And so there's an inauthenticity to AI that will never be replicated with that art. And it's the same thing for music where AI can, replicate Mozart, but it's not creating something of its own envisioning, right? It's just using patterns of other music in the past, of understanding major and minor keys and note sequences that seem to occur more frequently, but that's not creation. And I think that's where I don't want people to be amiss in understanding what this is going to mean, because with AI, some people will need to create a quick visual for a blog post, and it's a who cares moment, right? Like, yes, stock photographers may be a little more out of business, but when we talk about like true authentic creativity and generation of art, AI can't replace that because it's not AGI, it's not sentient, it doesn't have consciousness, it doesn't understand emotions. And so that's where the humanity aspect's going to be so pivotal in the next few decades.
So, a lot of my audience outside of this realm are lawmakers and policymakers when I advocate for funding or the importance of the arts and creativity. And I like to go beyond economic impact. I like to talk about how the arts are transformational. You can't be innovative unless you're creative. Touch on a little bit when we think of tech, we think of innovation. A lot of times we talk about AI. You've got governments talking about AI and how we have to protect ourselves around that. Where do the arts and the creators come into play, and how can we better perhaps communicate that humanity importance, the how we transform?
Well, so, when you talk about like tech being transformative, so we'll kind of go on even though it's debunked, the right brain, left brain theory, right? Right's mathematical and thinking and logic, and left is the creative side. And with that metaphor, tech is actually in the right side. So even though we may innovate on, what technologies can do and make them faster and more performant and all that, it's generally just very logical, process oriented thinking of how do we make this more effective, right? And dissecting components to understand what's going to lead there. But when we talk about the creative side, a lot of like even AI startups today are being founded by sociologists, by psychologists, by communications majors, by ballet dancers. Like the fact that there is this creative element that allows us to formulate and construct new perspectives, new opinions, new ways of tackling things, that creativity is really, really important. And so as much as tech has been innovative and created, Gen AI, like when you look at these large language models, when you look at a ChatGPT, it's literally just built on petabytes of patterns of historic data. And, the reason why, if you've ever tried to use it for email writing or a blog post or a LinkedIn post or anything in regards to trying to evangelize and articulate your brain and thoughts, it's mundane and it's boring and it feels inauthentic. And it's because if you remember the standard bell curve from middle school or high school, most people just regurgitate information. So it's centering or standardizing to the mean. And the creative aspect, that left brain aspect, are the tail ends, right? It's like what's contrarian, what's innovative, what has nobody done before. And I think when you look at creativity, when you look at the arts, when you look at why is this so important, we're trying to flip things on their head tenfold, 100-fold. And the only way to do that is to approach this not from a process of 10% improvement, but a complete renovation of a creative system and go, if we were to start this from scratch, how do we tackle this, right? It's how Elon Musk had built Tesla, right? In regards to looking at how do we 100x the car industry. And so that way of saying, okay, well, we have battery requirements and all that does get back to the logical and technical, but they had to figure out a way to transform that compared to the 10% mile per gallon improvements that we had for decades past.
Yeah. So how would you advise then somebody in the art sector who stays away from AI, thinks that this technology has no business around them? Is that a mistake? Because I like to say that even though you're a nonprofit status, that's a tax strategy, not a business strategy. You're still a business. And so I want to help shift mindsets into thinking more, not only like a business, but how do we respond, communicate, adapt like other industries so we have a seat at the table?
Well, I mean, AI is going to go away just like the cell phone and the computer did, And so if the reality is this is Pandora's box, whether you think it's a good box or bad box, it's open. We can't go back. Like it's literally impossible to go back now that this box has been open. So the only path through is forward. And, we don't still have horse and buggies. We have cars. And who knows what that'll look like 20, 30, 50 years from now. innovation is constant adaptation, and it's critical. And we can't just put our heads in the sand like ostriches and go, that's not going to happen. It won't affect our industry, because it's going to. And, the scary thing or the frustrating thing, I think, for a lot of CEOs is you have ones who want get ahead but don't know how to use it, and then it's just a matter of education, alignment, and the things that like are looking towards driving that, right? You just need guides or Sherpas to help on that journey to make sure you're successful and you have fewer missteps. But the ones who are looking to say, well, what's worked for the past 50 years has worked for the past 50 years, so that's how it's going to work, you're going to have smaller companies that will uproot you. If you're a 100-person art industry group, like an organization with 10 folks can be just as productive, and they might not get 100% of the actual quality that you'd get. It's kind of like saying, trying to create a Pixar or Disney film, you're not going to get that through inauthentic AI script creation and video creation, but some people would still pay for that, right? And because some people are price conscientious. So when we look at, the flip side of this, if you're a leader and you want to know what the heck to do or where the heck this is going, you have to recognize that, one, this is going forward, whether you like it or not. So then it's, well, what are your value systems lie? Because then you can figure out, where do we feel comfortable using AI without distilling our brand, right, and our values. And so that's where it's, like I said, a blog post, just creating an image in there. Instead of going through, having a junior go through stock images for 3 hours trying to find the right photo and then paying for that, you have a software subscription where you can create that with a single prompt and move on. And when we talk about like this quantity versus quality game, like quantity does matter a lot, right? And so I think that's a large piece of it. When we talk about like the true creativity, right? Like, why does this matter? AI is going to augment things, right? It's not going to be a replacement tool, but I've already seen it in, the, soundboard shows. I don't know if it's too far away, but in like the EDM space, right? If you have a soundboard, like you can use AI creation to get certain beats or certain sounds or things. And so foundationally, you already have a vision in your head of what you're trying to accomplish. And this helps you get, if you're an artist, it helps you get 60, 80% of the way there, maybe even further. But it allows you to like get rid of the mundane things so that you can spend more time on the creative things, the things that you like really envision. So if you need a hi-hat creation, like why would you spend 15 minutes like building that out if you could build it in 8 seconds? You know what you want to hear, and if you get it how you want it, then you can move on. And so that's where it's more of a, we'll say, adaptive in regards to our workflows themselves, or our creative life cycles, as opposed to let's use AI to replace our workforce.
So yeah, you're hitting on something that I've been just kind of holding back on. In my ear is ringing all these resource challenged organizations that don't have the manpower or the budget to hire a quality or robust marketing team, communication team, or development advancing. So what I'm hearing you say is employ these tools in areas to help efficiencies, especially when you're in a situation where you don't have the revenue to build out departments like large corporate organizations, and leverage these tools to help you advance your brand or your message or mission.
100%. Like, so if you're a company and you want to build brand awareness, like you need to have that in written and video form. And AI, video, they're good-ish right now, but still would feel inauthentic. But if you're not doing, like, if you don't put webinars out, right, or just mini video series or whatnot, and you don't have a blog post and you can choose between one of the two, then if you weren't going to do either of those or could only do one of those, then why don't you have AI like write your blogs that like are in your voice, and then you spend time on the videos, right? Like you want to be able to get your message out there. And so one is, yes, if you don't have the headcount to hire, but you're not doing the things that actually move the needle, that actually help improve your business, then why the heck wouldn't you want to use a tool that's going to help drive that? It's not going to be 100% perfect. Guess what? If you hired a marketing intern to write the blog post, it's not going to be 100% perfect either. So we have to get this out of our minds that like perfection has to occur, right? Like, you want the brand voice to reflect that, but you can, just like you could coach an intern or a junior for writing the blog, you can do the same thing with AI. And the same token, if you have a marketing team, now you can empower them to do more with less. And so that's really, really impactful, because if we say that grammar and syntax editing, like, take 2 hours on an article, feeding that in and just having it revise that for you as an editor, like, why wouldn't you do that? Because now you can get more things done. And I'm foundationally just talking about blog posts as an example, but anything within the creative life cycle, anything within the arts that are the mundane tasks that you do repetitively over and over and over again, like just to get things going, you shouldn't have to do that, right? You should like be able to kind of deposit your brain to say, hey, I do this every single time. Can you do these pieces for me? And then you have a launching pad to create a script, to write a new music piece, to generate like art that actually matters. And I think art's going to be the hard one, right? Because like you can do, let's say with Photoshop, you can do artistic renovations, right? With Gen AI. But when we talk about, we'll say paintings that you'd see in the Louvre, like you're not going to see, you might see AI created art at some point in there, but you're not going to see people that really use AI as the foundational piece to like be able to develop that. So that's the one where there's like, we'll say a discordancy or discrepancy from it, but everything else, you tend to have some of the same process or workflows in the creative life cycle. That's the logic aspect, and you should spend more time on the creative aspect.
Yeah, so I'm thinking too that most organizations struggle with shrinking audiences, and especially since the pandemic and the competition of streaming and all of these other avenues for entertainment. We have a hard time getting Gen Z millennials' attention. Can you put a prompt in chat or somewhere to say, hey, I want to attract audiences between the ages of 30 and 45, where would be the best place to find them, or what kind of communication would resonate with them the most? Are those the types of things that we could do in the arts to help us have AI as a tool to help us bridge the gap with some of those areas that we're challenged with?
Well, and so that's a huge piece, right? So I have power button on my phone hot coded to Perplexity AI, right? And so Perplexity AI is kind of like a chat GPT, and do web search. And so with that, that's often how I use that, right? I don't say write a LinkedIn post for me. I often use it for those strategic elements of, because it does web search, because it can look at research reports, because it can look at academic research, all of these components, I can say, hey, I really want to target these folks. Like, how do I engage with them, or where do they go, or how do they engage? And so if you find out that, you have been trying to target those kids on LinkedIn and YouTube, and they're only on Instagram and TikTok, then obviously there's a disconnect there, right? And you can pull data from the web. And that's the big piece of how I think of the future of AI, is that we go out for information. So we go to our CRM, and we go to the web, and we go to blog posts, and we go to LinkedIn and everything else you can think of. And now we can have this consolidation and distillation of information brought to us. So, and it's not even just that sequential step of where are millennials and where are Gen X and Gen Alpha like spending their time. We can also say, what would you recommend in regards to engaging with them? And this is what we do. What type of content would resonate most with them based on the research that you've seen so far, or based on engagement on other platforms? And so then you have the aspect to be able to emulate what others are doing. And so that's certainly how I use it. We use like AI, we automate 80% of the company. And so let's say if any of your listeners have ever had to make, if they do like consulting, if ever had to make a statement of work, that's literally engagement with whoever you're talking with, and you verbally agree on what needs to be done during discovery. And so then you have to go spend hours like writing that out in a format you want. And instead, I made it that, okay, we've already verbally agreed on this, so let's take the transcript, feed it in, ask it to format in the templatized statement of work that I like with the types of content I want to be in there, and output that for me. And so instead of something that used to take me 2, 4, 6 hours, now takes me 15 minutes, right? And so that type of impact where I don't see it as a creative element, it's just confirmation on what we verbally agreed upon. And I can get that back in your hands to say, does this look right? Or should we go back and forth on this now? Now we have like stronger relationships, stronger engagement. Like it's a communicative process between both of us where we can create value together. And I can also share that I used AI for that because I'm not looking to capitalize on profiteering in regards to this took me less time. I can showcase to you that these are the things that we do internally because it creates so much impact, because now I have more brain power to engage with people that want to talk with me. I can take more meetings. I can spend more time on strategy. I can spend more time doing creative things. And that's where we should be spending our time, whereas we use AI for the automation of those mundane aspects.
Are there best practices in AI? Are there just basics that if you aren't experienced or haven't really dabbled in it, what advice do you have? And then also the second part is, are there certain platforms, like you said, Perplexity AI, and I've never even heard of Perplexity. Like, where do you find all these? And are there ones that are best for certain tasks and ones that are better for other things?
Yep. So let me answer that two ways. So first is the AI umbrella can include prior to this, you and I had talked about like KPIs and metrics and whatnot. And so that's structured data. And so with structured data, you often have things called like machine learning models, right? Predictive models or classification models, like how much is my house worth based on square footage, number of bedrooms, bathrooms. And so when we look at AI as the umbrella of all of so machine learning, deep learning is like video and images. These large language models are like ChatGPT. When you look at that entire umbrella, our approach is to identify what are your business problems. It's who cares about AI? Let's not even talk about AI. What are your business problems? And then figure out, is this just an automation problem? Do you need a report? Do you need a predictive model? Do you need a computer vision model? Do you need something like a chat agent? So then we can figure out what you actually need as opposed to just buying a tool or platform and thinking it's a big red easy button. So that's the first piece, right? Is leaders need to spend time dissecting their organization and functional groups to understand, do we have high customer churn? Do we stink at product roadmap development? Do we have bad customer success, right? Whatever those gaps are, then you can start to identify how can we start resolving these? Because a lot of times the large language models, the ChatGPTs, not really the solution. There's often a lot simpler, a lot faster things that will produce even more market results. And I say that because the machine learning has existed since the 1950s, and it's basically structured data on a CRM, a database, an Excel table. And that has the fastest time to value and the highest cost savings or revenue increases compared to anything else in the AI space. So then when we talk about AI as tools, when we talk about these like large language models, I think there's two pieces, right? One is kind of your question on how to prompt, and two is how do we find the right tools we need. So the beauty of that on finding the right tools is you can go to ChatGPT, you can go to Claude, which is Anthropic's version, I like a lot. Meta has Llama, Perplexity AI actually has all of those models underlying with web search, so you can actually choose which model you use for that, depending on if you want, a research brief or creative like campaign strategies or whatever the heck it is. And you can ask those. And that the reason why you need to start with the business problems first is because then you can say, hey, we have a problem with responding to our customers that fill out forms on our website in a timely fashion. What AI tools can I use to help, right? And you can also go further and say, create a scoring matrix on like customizability and user friendliness and whatever the heck you want it to be, to create a table to compare a bunch of different tools, right? So instead of hiring a research firm 50, 100K to like BS you and create a 50-page PDF report, like now you can get that in a prompt or two, right? And when we get into prompting, there's two important pieces. One is iteration. So it doesn't matter how good your first prompt is. There's a good chance that you're going to need to iteratively prompt. And you may go, I don't like this output, or change this piece, or you're missing this, right? I was doing it the other day for running shoes. Had unfortunately a neuroma in my foot because I started training for a half marathon. And I said, okay, these are all the shoes that I have in my house. How do these rate for neuroma as well as for running? And then also, like, here's the issues I'm experiencing. And you recommend the best shoes that exist for these issues. And all the ones I have, go figure, are not good. But it recommended like Hoka's and some Brooks shoes for me to be able to leverage and like receive them. And they're beyond comfortable and dramatically help with pain reduction. And so the iterative aspect is really, really important during that. But the foundational prompt is also really important, because if I had taken this from the perspective of my foot hurts, what shoes should I wear, right? Then it doesn't really know what to recommend to you. So the more explicit you are in regards to defining a business problem, and this business problem, I guess, is my foot, right? The more explicit we are in regards to saying, this is how I run, these are the issues I've noticed, this is where I have tightness, this is where I have pain, like all of these things, I didn't even have to say I have a neuroma. I could just say, this is what I'm experiencing, and then ask it, what is the likely cause of this? And then what do you recommend? And so it says, oh, you have a neuroma and you need to change your shoes, right? And so understanding that you're not trying to just get a broad stroke of saying, write an email campaign for me, but you say, we create art, and this is our target audience, and this is what we do, and this is who we serve, and this is how we serve them, and these are our service offerings, and this is the impact we try to make, and these are our unique identifiers. All of those things in regards to your brand identity, as well as you being able to say, like, let's say it's a problem with customer churn, and you say, we have 18% customer churn. We don't know why. What questions do you need to ask me to help figure out why? And then it will create a list of questions, and then you answer those, and it will be able to help dissect, like, not only the root cause of customer churn, but provide recommendations to reduce that. And so that's where it's like so I look at, when we talk about these platforms, I look at it as ones that can connect to systems and bring you information, ones that can do like the research briefs for you, so that instead of you going out and reading a bunch of PDFs and articles, you can get that information brought to you. One that's more of a, executive assistant. So one of the ones you mentioned, tools, one of the ones I love is Fixer AI. That's FYXER.ai. And what they do is they'll connect to your email. I believe it's Gmail only, but it might be Outlook as well. And every email that comes in, they'll classify it from a psychological level, right? Not like how Gmail has like promotions, updates, and different tabs. They do it as need to respond, important FYI, meeting update, waiting reply, marketing. And so like, instead of the cognitive fatigue you get trying to like classify in your head, like, do I need to respond to this? Does this matter and whatnot? It automatically will classify those. And for the ones that it thinks you should respond to, it automatically creates a draft like in your voice based on what they already said. And so it's like, if it's not perfect, so what? Like, the blank page is the worst thing you can start with. And so just having that, you're like, oh, I got to change these 2 words, right? Or that those dates don't work for me for meeting, like, you change those, right? And so, and then the last, so the support assistant, I think, is going to be really pivotal, because executives can do so much more with less, and you don't have to have an EA and 8 team members to be as successful. I'm loosely saving 53 hours per week right now with some of the tooling we have. And then the last one is that, like, it's that digital brain, that digital twin, that like strategist, that coach that's like helping move you along, that if you had unlimited energy and unlimited time, that you could say, here's who I am, here's who the company is, here's who our customers are, here's the problems we're facing, let's whiteboard this. And it does that, right? It helps you dissect, and we can help with it too, but you do want to like build out like your identity and your company's identity, and the rules or things that are really important or foundational to the value system to make sure you get the responses you want. But at the end of the day, that's going to be so pivotal, because now if I can have, the top 5 reasons why we have customer churn, and I can talk with 5 different teams to say, each of you has a prerogative or an initiative this quarter to reduce customer churn by doing this one thing. Now they don't have to figure out what they should do. They don't get yelled at for like doing things wrong. They just focus on that for a quarter, and then you measure performance a quarter later and see, how is our churn, right? Then you can feed that data back in and say, hey, these are the numbers now. Like, what seems to be working based on these numbers, based on what we did. And so that aspect is like having an advisor, a coach, like a strategist, all in one, that's helping you drive like your best self.
That's amazing. I never thought to prompt chat or any of these others to ask me questions to help it solve whatever challenges I'm facing. So I can't wait to try that. And then I'm sure you'll give me, I've got Fixer and Perplexity, and I think you said Claude. I'll list some of these that you've mentioned today in the notes so people can reference them, as well as where to find you and information on you. But as we wrap up this conversation, you did touch on metrics, and one area that I feel strongly about is that the future of arts funding, or what I like to call arts investment, I think is going to rely on data in measuring outcomes or as I say, to turn impact into investment. What do you see as far as data collection and the importance of metrics and understanding metrics in general, but then specifically as it relates to nonprofits or arts, to talk about impact and to be able to communicate in a business return on investment or return on art?
Well, so, it's funny. I think that, I was an all-state actor. I was one of 2,000 musicians in the Sydney opening ceremonies back in 2000. And like, so I love art and creativity. Like, math's a lot of fun for me, but I love this aspect. And I think that there's, a discordancy in regards to, well, we can't be creative if we use data for data driven. And that's not true. You're not using data to change your creativity. You're using data to change your outputs. And so like when I was in my PhD program, I worked with Virginia Tech's Office of International Research, Education, and Development. And the NGOs in some third world countries were having a ton of issues with sustainable farming practices in small villages, because the villages would burn through the land and then they'd move somewhere else, right? So you couldn't create an agrarian economy that's stable because they're always moving. And the NGOs were promoting like how to do sustainable farming. And we use something called graph analysis, social network analysis. And I had looked at, well, where do people go in the village, along with like going to the NGOs, but looking at an entire village, as well as those that interact with the village. Where do village people go to for knowledge? Where do they go to for trust? And when I looked at the data, one thing really, really stood out. None of the villagers went to the NGOs for them. None of the villagers built trust or trusted the NGO directly. They all took and implemented information from the village chief. And so if the NGO did not get buy-in from that village chief, then the ability for this entire culture, this entire group to be able to live and persist and be essentially, you end up being creative in regards to which things you can plant on what plot of lands, what year, to create that sustainable farming. And it wasn't denouncing or dismissing like, here's how structured you have to be successful. It was, you have to be creative in getting the buy-in from the village chief, because then all that knowledge, all that trust will distill out to everyone else, right? And so you're using data and information to help drive information sharing and the creative aspects around that. When we talk about like the arts, when we talk about performance metrics, KPIs, if you went to Juilliard, you're going to practice a piece, 200, 300, 500 times. And you've done it so much as an explicit artist in that realm that you know where you made a mistake, you know where a gap is, you know what an issue is. But that's intrinsic, right? Which is basically your logic or data brain saying, that note was flat, right? By 4%. But when we look at like, how do we improve our organization? We have to have the right metrics and KPIs, because we need to know how are we doing today and where do we feel like we're failing? And whether that's like relative to us or relative to our market or industry, but we need to know where are we doing really well, because we need to perpetuate that and promote it. And where are we floundering or failing, because we need to change that. And so if we, let's just say on the sales side, right? Most organizations will have like some sort of outbound like BDR, SDR, right? To call out. And if you don't measure anything, then it's really problematic, right? Because, you're like, well, why aren't we getting opportunities in the door? And so that BDR like needs to be tracked on generally something rudimentary, like how many phone calls they make, right? And then you look at how many of those lead to a meeting and how many of those lead to, an opportunity. But, and so that's like the initial aspect of tracking, right? Of like, okay, well, if we need to double that, then we have to double the number of calls they have to make. But the true reality is you get to be creative with that person's role, because maybe it's not actually about the number of calls they need to make. Maybe they need more training, or maybe they need better marketing collateral, or maybe they need better access to the right folks who would actually buy your product or service. And so there's a creative aspect to that, but you use data to help like support and enforce that, to make sure that what you're doing makes sense. And that way you can A/B test, you can see what's working, what's not working, and you can pivot faster so that you stay competitive, and you can use creativity to drive the why, but at least you're tracking the what to know if the why is working.
Yeah, exactly. You're not just living on a mission and saying, we're just it. Right. You gotta have some feedback on that. That's really great. And I love how you're bringing in so many just business analogies that are not the creative sector or the arts, that we can apply to the arts, that we need to look at these practical, basic business strategies. I think your pillars, vision, strategy, and metrics, correct?
Well, yeah. And when looking like at our 12-step framework, right? It's AI is our 11th one, right? It's not to lead with AI. It's leaderships need to have a vision on who they want to be, a strategy. We generally do it through an AI lens, but a strategy on how to get there, measuring the right KPIs and metrics to track how you do over time. And then it's breaking down communication silos. Then it's looking at process and workflows in regards to where the gaps or inefficiencies. Because when we talk about this fear in the creative arts of like AI taking over, no, it's taking over the business aspects. It's taking over the mundane aspects. It's taking over the things that don't really matter, so that we can spend more time being creative. And so it's not replacing us. It's replacing those mundane process and workflows that hinder our success and speed to and time to value. And so then that leads into, what technology do you actually need to be successful? Then we foster a culture of innovation. Then we start looking at, well, where can we drive with AI? Not just the chat GPTs, which fall under technology, but like, where do you guys really, really need models and things built that are actually going to help create revenue and cost savings, so that you can spend more time investing in those creative aspects, right? And you have more runway to do so. And then it ends up being much more on the humanistic element, because I think of the wow experience, where the more connections we have, like the more that, I don't know, music or a movie or whatever, like not only shapes your creative process, but it shapes your audience. Like you create a wow experience for that audience, and you create something memorable, right? And I just always think about it like it leads starting from that organizational level, but down to all the individuals, right? It's how do you give everyone in your organization 10 hours back? If they have 10 hours back, how do we make sure they focus on the things that matter? So you don't just have more meetings and the BS that we get in corporate, but you have more time to spend on creativity and workshopping and storyboarding and all the things that matter in that process. And so that's what I really love about this industry, is that it's not replacing people, and it's not a sentient Terminator robot. It's allowing us to be our best selves and spending more time on the things that we love doing. And it can handle all the stuff that we never wanted to do in the first place.
That's really great. Perfect way to end the conversation. One question that I like to ask each person that comes on is, how do you define art? So Matt, how would you define art?
Man, that's a wonderful question. The funny thing about art is that it's not that it's not definable, but it's a subjective human experience. And, if you've been to, museums in New York or Paris or whatnot, like some pieces move people and some pieces they just will pass by. And when you look at music, whether, you have an affinity for country or rap or EDM or pop, like something in there viscerally resonates with people. And so when thinking about art as a creative mechanism, it's sharing your heart and your passions in a way that you can best share that. And when you look at the external experience of how others connect with it, it's really about how does that emotionally move them?
That's great. I had a sense of it opens us up to being vulnerable and connecting on an authentic level, not like AI, but perhaps that's maybe why some that aren't or say I'm not creative have a hard time opening up to it, because there's a bit of vulnerability that goes along with being receptive to art.
Well, I think that's, I think coming from psychology and sociology and communication and acting and music, that the more time you spend on self-discovery and self-reflection and like knowing who you are and what you value, the easier it is it's a vulnerability at first, but then it's an empowerment, right? It's that you know who you are and you know what you enjoy and your value systems. And it means that you can adhere so strongly to that. And you know what impassions you, what drives you. And the same thing, like how to motivate and inspire and connect with others. And so that all of that social aspect and all of that artistic aspect is so critical to make sure that we don't become, isolated or self-centered or just pure logical, because it's inauthentic. And what really matters are the experiences and memories we build on this journey we call life.
Thank you so much, Matt. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it too.